We want to bring in our transportation correspondent now, Jeff Pagay, is joining us from Washington. Jeff, what can you tell us about what you know about this situation?
Well, obviously the focus now is trying to get to this very mountainous region where French officials believe this plane has crashed. Of course, French President François Hollande has said that there are likely no survivors. But also you want to get to the scene because you want to figure out exactly what happened. And to do that, you have to get control of these black boxes. There are two of them, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. So the focus on parallel tracks will be to get to the scene to see if there are any survivors, but also to find information that will help determine exactly what went wrong. The thing about commercial aviation is often you learn through tragedy, sadly. And that's what will happen in this case as investigators try to figure out what went wrong so aviation, commercial aviation, can go forward and learn from this.
And Jeff, can you give us a little bit of perspective on this crash in particular? Is this a problem for these kinds of planes, or is this an anomaly?
Well, the A320 has a good safety record, and we still don't know what happened there, so we're going to have to wait for investigators to determine exactly what went wrong. But yeah, generally speaking, this is a plane that is the workhorse of the industry. It has a good safety record. And just as a point of fact, takeoff and landings are typically the most problematic phases of flight. Mid-flight, you do not often hear of crashes occurring or something going wrong mid-flight. Typically, it's with takeoffs and landings. And that's why this case is different in many ways. And also, the terrain where this plane has gone down, according to French officials, that is going to be really problematic in terms of getting to the scene. This is a mountainous region. How do you get to the scene? How do you recover the wreckage? Because oftentimes in investigations like this, they try to put this puzzle together. I mean, literally, that's what they will try to do by putting the plane back together. That's what happens in many of these investigations. And so you want to try to gather as much information, physical evidence as possible. And that's what they will try to do here. But again, the mountainous region there will pose problems for investigators and rescue efforts.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to ask you to stand by while we bring in Mark Rosenker, former NTSB chairman and our CBS News aviation analyst. Mark, let me just ask you to take a look at something. We have a graph here that shows some data about this particular flight and what happened. And I wonder, it's about the altitude and sort of speed changes that took place. What is it that you can make out of this particular graph, out of the clues that we have so far about what possibly might have happened here?
It would be, I think, inappropriate for me to speculate on looking at graphs. So we have to really get the flight data recorder, and at that point we may be able to take a look from the flight data recorder and match it up with that graph, and that would help significantly to understand the performance of the aircraft. We're going to, I really believe, find that flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, and from that we will have an excellent idea of what actually happened here. As Jeff said, it's extraordinarily rare to have an aircraft get into trouble and end up in a crash like what we are now having to deal with when it's at cruise altitude. This is going to be something we're going to be looking at very carefully. We know that this aircraft has been operating for more than 24 years. We know that they have two engines that are CFM56s, and these engines were a consortium between the French and General Electric, so it would not surprise me that we would see participants from General Electric in this investigation. It's going to be led, this investigation is going to be led by the French version of the NTSB called the BEA. But the Germans will be participating with it, Airbus will be participating, the engine maker will be participating, and if invited, the NTSB will also be participating according to the rules and regulations of ICAO Annex 13.
Mark, as you said, so many unknowns until we get that black box back. But what can you tell us about what we do know about this flight definitively? What happened? What kind of information was sent back?
We do know that the aircraft did get to its cruising altitude. It operated for some minutes before, in fact, we began to see it actually descend. It did not descend in an extremely fast way. It was about 3,400 feet a minute, still faster than traditionally you would descend, but still apparently in a controlled fashion. And it was at near the end, when they were getting close to the mountains, is when the pilot made a distress call.
And tell us a little bit about what happens next for both the families that are waiting to hear about this information, to hear about the status of their loved ones. What kind of gears start turning in events of crashes like these?
Well, both the authorities and the airlines work together in attempting to create a family support type of capability. They will be gathering all of the families of the victims in an area to try to provide as much information as they possibly can. But again, this is still very early in the investigative phase, and until we know for sure that there are no survivors, they are not going to be telling the families very much, unfortunately.
All right, Mark Rosenker. We want to bring in Jeff once more. Jeff, so in a situation like this, typically, as we heard from Mark, there is obviously the authorities in France will be investigating this, but how long, if in fact there is any kind of assistance that is requested, how long might that take?
Well, an investigation, typically in a situation like this where you have a commercial airplane crash of this magnitude, this is an investigation that will take a year, maybe a little bit more than that. And typically the protocol is to release a preliminary report 10 days or so after the crash. That's just the way the system works. There is a system in place for these investigations, and it's quite detailed. There is a protocol that is followed, and that's what we've seen not only with MH370 really in that case, but also MH17 and Air Asia in December. There is a protocol that is followed according to international regulations, and that's what we will see in this case. Again, the BEA, the French version of the National Transportation Safety Board in this country, will lead that investigation. You will have the investigators from Spain, but also investigators or a team from Airbus will participate, because Airbus, of course, is a French company. And then you will have the Germans as well involved. And as Mark noted, these engines they are GE engines, but it's GE, and what that means is that the NTSB could very well be called in to take part in this investigation. I've reached out to them and haven't quite heard back. But what I expect that they will say is at this point they are monitoring the situation. But all of these investigative agencies in situations like this are ready to assist and to provide whatever expertise they can to help in this investigation. But there is a very detailed plan in terms of how these investigations progress from here.
You know, I want to go back to Mark for just a moment. Mark, in a situation like this, we're talking about the French Alps. How difficult will the rescue and recovery process be here?
This is going to be extremely difficult. You're working at 6,000, 6,500 feet. These are jagged mountains. Unfortunately, it's going to take specialized equipment and special people that do this kind of thing, that work at those altitudes. I'm confident that they will ultimately recover the black box. They will recover the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder. Those two devices are extremely important in understanding what happened. I also believe that they will survive this type of impact and potential any type of fire that may have ensued. But the real key right now is to get to that debris field, hope and pray that maybe some miraculous thing happened and that maybe there are some survivors. But at this point, it does not look good.
Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the age and maintenance record of this aircraft, and what, if anything, does that affect?
Well, the maintenance records are going to be part of the investigation. They get their aircraft maintained by Lufthansa Technik, which is a world-class MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility. These people are very good at what they do, and you never know what potentially they will find in the maintenance record of this particular aircraft. It's been operating for more than 24 years. It is an aircraft which enjoys a good safety record, as Jeff indicated earlier. It is a workhorse, just like the 737. These two aircraft around the world are flying most of the people. But in this particular case, we do not know exactly why this aircraft, when it got to cruise altitude, which again is very, very rare to have something go wrong and end up in a catastrophic ending. But accidents are more than one thing. They are always a series of events which ultimately lead us to the catastrophic ending.
Back to the age of the aircraft, Mark, you said this is an aircraft that's about more than 20 years old, about 24 years old. Is that particularly old for this kind of plane? And Jeff, feel free to chime in here as well. I'm just curious because you hear about an aircraft that's been in service for more than 2 decades. I'm wondering, how does that fit into what we know about how long these aircraft can be in service?
Well, this aircraft, again, is probably in its mid to late life. We're dealing with a 24-year-old aircraft, but again, if it is maintained properly, they will fly very, very safely for another 5 to perhaps even 10 years.
Just wanted to provide a little context for our viewers about some of the footage and stills that you're seeing. These are coming to us from France 24 and are the first images of the recovery effort in the French Alps between two cities. Excuse me, this is France 2, not France 24. Between these two towns, Digne and Barcelonnette, where this Airbus Germanwings flight 9525 went down earlier this morning. Now, at about 7:30 Eastern Standard Time this morning, French President François Hollande was the first public official to speak out about this tragedy. The flight path here, though, going from Barcelona to Dusseldorf. And during that press conference, French President Hollande said that he not only reached out to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, but as luck would have it, was being visited that day by the King of Spain.